Here comes Irwin. He is an excellent puller, let me tell you. He really digs down and charges towards the end of his leash. So while I like to use a long line with all the dogs, I don't want a dog to fully hit the end of the leash at full speed. So you see me starting to step on the leash here to actually shorten it to lessen the impact. All I'm doing with Irwin right now is turning away from him every time he passes me. My goal is to get him to realize that there's an end of a leash and to be mindful of it, instead of seeing the end of a leash as something to pull into and try to move the object at the other end. Me. So again, as he passes me, I'm just turning and going the other way. It's going to look hectic for a bit until we start to get a rhythm. That's why I typically start in a quiet small space, such as an alley like this, or right in front of your house, as long as it's not too busy. I want the dog to, again, focus on the handler and realize there's an end of a leash. You'll start to see Irwin realize that the human turns before the end of the leash comes. Sorry, I had to switch out my pivots here. One of them died. But again, as you'll see when we get back out here and we start to turn back and forth, you'll notice Irwin is going to start paying more attention to me and when I turn, because the pattern has been when he passes me, the human turns and then the end of the leash happens. Dogs are very good at learning patterns, so as long as I stay consistent, he'll start to be able to predict the end of the leash is coming by when I turn. So to prevent that, he starts turning with me. And as I start to get him to turn with me, I just shorten my leash to get him closer to me, and eventually he's going to be walking right next to me. Now I have stayed silent with Irwin through most of this exercise up until now. Now I'm just adding some verbal praise when he's walking with me, talking him up, telling me he's a good boy, trying to create some engagement to make being with me pretty cool to him. Something else I want to note is notice I've kept him on my left side throughout most of the exercise by either turning into or away from him or using my line to help guide him over to that left side. Since Irwin's doing such a good job, I decided to add in some automatic sits here. I'm doing hands-on automatic sits for a couple reasons. I really want Irwin to get more comfortable with being handled. So me putting him into the position over and over again, he's going to realize that my hands on his body is not a bad thing. Me putting him into a position is not a bad thing, and praise comes afterwards. I'm also doing it to make sure that when he does sit, it's where I want him to sit, which is right next to me, not out in front, behind, or off to the side. So it's really helping to build some muscle memory and, again, help him get more comfortable with handling. Right here you can see how he gets a little anxious with being touched. He moves away. He gets a little whale-eyed, lip-licking, and some ears pinned. And you'll also notice that his tail has dropped into the down position. These are all indicators Irwin is uncomfortable with being handled and put into positions. The affection is also stressing him out, which I'll address again in a bit. But why do I want to put him into positions if it makes him uncomfortable? Well, if I repeat this pattern over and over again and it's uneventful and ends in praise, he'll start to become more comfortable with being handled, being put into positions. This is important because he will most likely end up getting groomed by a groomer who will want a compliant dog, and he'll also be handled by vets and vet techs. And if we can get Irwin comfortable with being handled and put into positions, it's only going to benefit him and the people that have to handle him. And real quick, I'm going to show how he's actually pretty uncomfortable with most affection. You can see here once I put him into position and I pet him on the outside of his chest, he's pretty tolerant. But when I go to pet him on top of his head, he'll dip his head, he'll move away, his ears pin, he'll lick his lips, and he gets whale-eyed. He's uncomfortable with that. So again, when I go on the outside of the chest, he's way more tolerant, actually leans into me. When I go to pet him on the inside of his chest, he dips his head down, pins his ears, licks his lips, and he's whale-eyed again. So he's uncomfortable with this as well. He's most comfortable with me reaching on the outside of him and petting on the inside of his chest. So that's what we're going to use for praise. but we're also going to be counter conditioning him to being handled on his face, on the inside of his chest as well. Again, life's going to happen. Someone's going to pet him on his head. Someone will have to touch his face, the vet, the groomer, who knows. So let's get him comfortable with it now.